Hey guys, and welcome back to another captivating episode of Explicably Inexplicables. I'm Arnav, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host Nikhil. Today, we're delving into a topic that's been on everyone's minds, the future of remote work.
As you all know, remote work became the norm during the COVID-19 pandemic. But what's actually in store for the future?
Yeah, I think for this episode, we're going to go and delve deep into how remote work has evolved during the pandemic, how it's affected the economy, and just how it's going to change in the future.
Yeah, definitely. So in the past, right, remote work during the pandemic was obviously a necessity. Companies had to adapt quickly. And to some degree, that remote work wasn't as effective as in-person works, right? Things like Zoom, when people are just muting or turn their mics off, you can't really tell if they're getting their work done. So that's why it's kind of important to understand some of the challenges that they faced in the future.
Exactly. I mean, there were a lot of challenges during remote work, right? There's stuff like technology constraints where people would just, and like obviously both of us have probably done this during Zoom. We're like, oh, my mic isn't working, oh, my camera isn't working, when actually it was working.
Sure.
We just have that, stigma. There are obviously a lot of other challenges with remote work, such as maintaining team collaboration, and even making sure that people are on task and productivity numbers. And companies have to find ways to overcome these challenges while ensuring the business continues and prospers.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's actually like a lot of statistics I was reading like a couple of nights ago, and even when I was during that Zoom phase a couple of years ago during COVID, and some of those things are like, so a lot of employees actually found that remote work allowed them to be more productive because of a reduced commute time, right? So a lot of people, especially if you live in high congested areas like, I don't know, New York or LA, where you have like upwards of an hour commute time, you're saving a lot of time, right? And obviously there's a quieter work environment for the most part, right? Unless you have like, a 2-year-old running out the house or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's all just based on like comfortability. Like me personally, I work better and I work harder and more productive in my own space, my own niche, versus, for example, going to school and working in like a classroom environment. Like if I'm in my pajamas sipping hot chocolate with my computer and my 2 monitors, I get the most work done then. And so it's just all about like comfortability, and people realize that might even boost productivity numbers, which is why companies are also trying to go advocate for remote work.
Yeah, for sure. And there's also like the other side of that. I kind of like disagree with you on that. Like I'm definitely someone who works better in person just because it helps to be a little bit more accountable, right? When someone can actually see your face, put a name to a face when you're communicating with someone. So for me, I feel like my work is a lot more effective in person, but I do see where you're coming from.
That makes sense. Like I guess in a more team environment, it's important to put that, name to the face.
Definitely.
Yeah. And we know companies have also had many benefits with their remote work, such as like reducing overhead costs from office space, and even a wider access to the global talent pool, right? I feel like remote work has opened up so many opportunities to hire employees from different geographical locations. Because, like, let's say we're in Texas, right? Me and Nikhil, if for those of you who don't know, we live in Frisco, which is in Texas. But let's say we have a specific need for a specific employer or like employee, and we need this person that has this specific skill set. And in that time of day, there aren't any available. Like, there aren't people who are actively looking for that job. We can hire someone from California, from Nevada, from Maine, from New York, wherever, to do that job for us, especially if all it requires is if everything's virtual. And so it just has a wider access to the global talent pool, which is a huge benefit for companies who are trying to look for new hires.
Yeah, and I know that kind of opportunity aspect of it has also benefited the employees a lot. Like I've heard a lot of stories on the news where people who, for example, wanted to live in a different city, right, but still want to reap like the benefits of job opportunities in a different city can do that. So like, for example, if you, live in LA, right, there's obviously a lot of job opportunities there, especially near Silicon Valley, right? And so if you wanted to continue doing that work, you could, and then just go live in a cheaper place, like, for example, Frisco, which is just a tad bit cheaper than LA. And you can reap both of those benefits at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, because then it also provides many workers with the incentive of joining jobs from all across the world and living from where they want to be in their dream home. And I think that's a really important thing to talk about. But as we move away from this COVID pandemic style like work environment, and we're moving to like a more of a normal work environment, what's in store for us for the future?
So I think in the future, like I know I read that a lot of studies were saying that it's kind of going to be a mix of in-person and remote work. And so like even now, the Global Health Organization has actually declared that the COVID-19 pandemic is over. Not to say that it's not still persisting, obviously in humans today it is, but it is no longer a, medically, conduced pandemic. And with that said, right, we're still seeing a little bit of mix of in-person and remote work. From time to time, I have to hop on a Zoom call, right, whether it be for school or my activities outside of school, right. And that's just kind of due to the fact that if you have a large amount of people that need to be on a call at the same time, it's actually a lot easier to go on Zoom, right? Having 100 to 200 people on a call versus in one classroom at a school can sometimes be a little bit challenging, right? If it's at a school. Exactly. And so I think with that said, right, I guess from your perspective, like how can this affect like the cultural aspect of the workplace?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's important to note that companies are considering like a mix and a hybrid because it feeds in with flexibility and collaboration, and it strikes that like balance that can boost company productivity to the whole, because there are benefits and there are flaws in both remote work and going in person, like that we already talked about.
Yeah, and I know like some companies have actually started doing like a specific number of days. Like I think my mom's company was saying that you can have up to 3 days of remote work, but you have to come to the office at least 2 days, or you have to come to the office on Fridays or Mondays or whatever.
But in terms of workplace culture is the thing you asked, right? I think in terms of workplace culture, remote work can sometimes lead to isolation and just that feeling of sense of away from the team. So I think it's really important to know about team chemistry. Most of the time when, I think I'm going to take this example from sports, right? Like let's say in a soccer team or football team, when there's higher team chemistry and when everyone's friends with each other, they usually perform better. Their numbers are better. They achieve more just because they have that sense of unity, and that individuality is kind of gone. It's like they work as a team. So when you go in person, it maintains a strong workplace culture, even in like a hybrid environment, and like you mentioned before, it puts a name to a face, and oh, this guy, I'm friends with this guy, oh, this guy, I like to hang out with him on Fridays. It sort of builds that team like environment, which can boost company productivity, can improve sales, like just achieve more.
Yeah, for sure. I think it kind of literally just boils down to, as simple as it sounds, it literally just boils down to the 5 senses. You're literally restricted to basically only 3 senses when you're on Zoom, right? So if, for example, someone turns off your camera, there's no vision, right? There's no sight. And you can't touch anyone. So if you're playing like a physical sport, right, that obviously cannot occur on Zoom. And so I think that's why that for the most part, or just for at least for some companies, they kind of prefer that in-person work. And I think with that, right, a lot of industries, on the other hand, actually like to embrace remote work. And I know like industries like technology, finance, and I think customer support have always been a little bit more open to remote work. And actually in the past, right, even before COVID, customer support has been online for some time, right? Like if you call up a hotel, you can make a reservation online. If you want to call up, your local driver's ed to schedule a lesson, you can do that as well. And so that stuff maybe hasn't been affected by COVID as much, and it's more so just kind of that feasibility aspect.
I think actually, in terms of getting affected by COVID, it might be actually like improving in growth because it's already online. So their in-person thing has been affected, and they just have more access to resources for virtual stuff because everyone's, acclimated to that type of environment. And it's just, there's no point to spend overhead costs on different bills for in-person stuff when everything you can do is remote and productivity numbers stay the same regardless. Yeah,
definitely. Obviously on the other end though, while some office-centric industries are still exploring remote work options, there are obviously some industries that, aren't leaning towards that. For example, the arts or dance, etc. Obviously all those things require you to kind of be in person to really experience that. And so that's definitely something that's not been growing as much in terms of remote work as technology, finance, and customer support.
Yeah, I think that's a really great example. And I guess the future is all about finding the right balance between flexibility, productivity, and even maintaining a positive workplace culture within that team environment. So I think that's a good wrap up for our episode today. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay tuned for more Explicably Inexplicables. Peace.